thanks for the invitation to be here. I think it's very nice that we can sort of combine efforts into solving the plastic issue. And there are many troubles there and many challenges. As you were saying in the introduction here, my background is from environmental engineering, and we are focusing on let's say maintaining and bringing plastic back into circularity and ensuring that we can recycle plastic instead of plastic being a pollution in the environment, and at the same time doing this in a sustainable way so that we make sure the plastic is recycled and used and utilized in the best way possible for the environment. This is our main focus. Of course, there's all other sustainability aspects, also economically and societal aspects, but our focus is in general on the environmental part. What I would like to do today is to give you some insights in how we tackle the plastic circularity and the plastic sustainability, both how we address the topic, why we see this is important for us, and the drivers there, but also giving you some insights into what are the challenges and what can we actually do to improve the situation, and also how far is there to go, basically. And all this is from the perspective of recycling and circularity. So before we dive into things, and I'd just like to take a small step back and have a look at together with you why we are doing this. And I'm sure you have seen many of these kind of circles before in various contexts, and there are so many of those. But basically, they're indicating similar things, that we want to maintain resources, materials. I hope you can see my cursor here. That we can use and maintain the materials into our products and get them back into circularity again, and basically keep this loop running without really losing materials and resources, or without basically the need for digging out and getting new primary resources into the loop. And of course, this is an ideal concept, and this is like not possible as such in real life, because there will always be losses along the way. But this is basically the idea. I think when we talk about these things and circularity, it's important to remember why we are doing this, and this is from the perspective of Europe. One of the main drivers is that we want to ensure the access to resources and raw materials in society. And in Europe, and that has been for long the main driver. We also want to ensure that we have innovation, and this is very much competitiveness, industrial competitiveness with different regions of the world. We want to ensure that we have the innovation, and we have also an industry in the future as well. And then there's also the societal and the social angle, that we want to ensure job creation. These are sort of three main drivers, but the effects of that, which are important for us, is a lot of other things. For example, less pollution, less plastic pollution, energy savings, better climate, more biodiversity, better air quality, so on and so forth. So many things related to the environmental part. This is actually what we want to achieve on top of the other things. So this is some of the background, and then just to give you an idea about where we stand and where our focus is. This is sort of that part of the circle there. That it's easy to draw a circle, but actually to make sure that it's also closed, this is very difficult, and especially this part by bringing waste and waste materials back into the economy again as new raw materials. So this is, in other words, recycling as a broad concept. So let me just dive into and give you an idea about how we are thinking about this when we talk about sustainability, whether recycling or, again, plastic circularity is sustainable or not, and what is important there. First of all, we need to know what we are talking about. As you know, plastic is not just plastic. There are many different kinds of plastic. and I will come back to also many different forms plastic can be in. When we collect this as waste, when it ends, when we are done as consumers with the plastic and we throw it out, we need to know in which way and reflect on in which ways we actually collect this. And again, there are many different ways for doing that. Then we need to consider how we process the plastic, how we convert this into new raw materials, or potentially if we talk about waste in general, we can basically do three things with it. We can either make it into energy, we can make waste, this is not plastic obviously, but waste in general into nutrients, or waste into new raw materials that can then be used for production of other materials, chemicals, so on and so forth. Then we need to consider, based on these new, let's say, raw materials from plastic, which types of new products are we actually producing? So it's not enough just to use the upgraded, the processed, the recycled plastic for something. It has to be used for something that is actually useful and ultimately can provide a saving in primary resources. So the new use should lead to our less need for virgin plastic, basically, and ultimately oil products. These are the savings that we have to balance with all the efforts that we put into this loop here, because all of what we are doing, we are driving around with the plastic, we're collecting it, we're processing it. This has environmental impacts. So the savings have to be better than the impacts. And then we are back to the beginning again, and hopefully the new products, they are actually able to go around in a new circle. This is another one of the challenges that we see where we are not there yet. This is just to prove, the conceptual way we see things. Let's dive into the plastic a bit. And as in general, this is not only plastic that is as pollution, but of course this can be as pollution. But even when we collect it for recycling, the plastic is not clean. There are different kinds of contamination. We divide this into physical contamination or chemical contamination. So there can be physically be other materials there, paper, labels, so on and so forth, stuff that shouldn't be put in the waste bin for plastic. But there can also be chemical contamination that actually makes it difficult to recycle. For example, different kinds of additives, colorants, other stuff that has been mixed together with the plastic. And that's not good when we want to recycle it. So the question is really, how can we, and on a large scale, can we close the loops with plastic? Can we recycle it? Well, today we cannot recycle everything, but well, we are at the left-hand side here, and we want to go at the right-hand side and have some new, nice, clean plastic pellets that can be used for production of new plastic products. But there are many things that has to go on along the way for getting from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. The plastic waste, plastic has to undergo different kinds of processing, shredding into smaller pieces. It has to be washed. It has to be separated depending on the polymer. It has to be dried and other kind of cleaning processes also. And it has to be made into pellets again. And once we are there, okay, it can be used again. But there are also different kinds of, let's say, rejects or residuals from this process here. And whether some waste plastic is good to recycle or not, that depends on the material properties, the contamination level, what we call the resource quality of this plastic, how efficient these processes are from a technical point of view, what are the emissions again. So to answer whether plastic recycling is sustainable or not, we have to capture all these aspects and evaluate those against each other. And one way of doing that is to use life cycle assessment or environmental assessment. And there are many different ways of doing that basically, but at DTU we have developed for the last, I would say, 15 years, maybe even more, software and models to do this precisely on waste materials and recycling system. One of these are called EastTech here. That is very advanced in the way that it can actually follow all the steps through a recycling process, like I illustrated before, and follow the amount of plastic through this and what happens with it and the emissions. And basically we sum all that up, and then we can find out whether one solution is more sustainable and more beneficial for the environment than another solution. And these are, there's a lot of the activities that we do. Now just let's dive a little bit into some of the challenges that we have. So when we talk about recycling, and I've mentioned resource quality. Quality is one of the things that is a little bit vague in many ways, but it's something that we want to maintain. I will come back to what we mean by that. But when we talk about circular economy and recycling, one of the, let's say, the typical vision that we have, that people have, is that we, in the case of plastic, is that we extract some oil, we make some plastic, and then we make some products, obviously, that is used by consumers, and then they are discarded eventually. So ideally, what we want to do is take all that and recycle this into new products that can then go around and be recycled again, like indefinitely. And as I said earlier, this is not possible because we have losses. This is one thing. The other reason why it's not possible is that we have different qualities of plastic. We have different requirements for plastic. For some types of plastics, for some purposes, we have many strict requirements. For example, for food packaging, there we don't want chemicals that can be transferred into our foodstuff that we then eat. So there we have high quality, but high quality and large strict requirements. But for other plastic purposes or applications, there are less. For example, in the building and construction industry, as an example. So instead of just having one loop, we need to consider these different qualities here. What happens today is the typical situation is really that we make the plastic in all the different kinds of qualities that we have. We use those, and then we eventually discard those. And of course, we want to recycle as much as we can. But what usually happens, both the lower and the higher qualities, they are recycled to the extent they are recycled into something that is lower quality, lower than originally. And then for the high quality, we need to take virgin material still back into the loop. And just as an example of different kinds of qualities of plastic that we can consider, okay, we have food packaging, as I said, we have very high quality requirements, and then different kinds of products here, we have less strict requirements. And just as an example, we cannot take plastic from the car industry and recycle that just as it is into food packaging. We would not want to do that. On the other hand, the food packaging that can usually be used for different purposes down in the hierarchy here. So the good stuff, the high quality, can be used for other things, while that the other way, this is not the case. And these things we have to take into account when we consider the efficiency and the sustainability of a recycling solution. So just to give you an example, for Europe here, we have different kinds of polymer types here, PT, HDPE, and so on. And we have different kinds of the market share of this from up to 100% here is divided into high quality and low quality based on the different types as I showed you before. So again, as an example, when we have this type of recycling that we have today, even though we are very good at recycling, or if we even were much better at recycling than we are today, we are usually only able to cover the lower qualities, as I mentioned. And this means that there's a large part of the market that we are not able to cover yet with recycled plastic. Now, this is not 100% as black and white as I describe it here. For example, PET, even for plastic bottles, drinking bottles, that is an example where we are in fact actually able to recycle the bottles into new bottles. But that is just one example where it works. But there are certain requirements to the collection system and the way we treat it, and we cannot mix that with other types of materials to make sure that it still has the quality and fulfill the requirements for food grade plastic. So there we have some challenges with the quality, like maintaining quality, and I'm just using some different words, also functionality and the properties of the plastic when we do the recycling. So the question is, what are basically the perspectives for Europe? We have looked into, again, for just a few types of plastics, the different types of uses of these plastics and what actually happens with this. And this is a little bit long diagram here, but what it shows here is that for 3 types of plastics, polymers here, we today in Europe use these 32 million tons, and this is based on virgin materials. We have a number of different application areas, from food packaging, non-food packaging, agriculture, automobile, building construction, electronics and fibers, and textiles, and then other purposes also. When we are done with that as consumers, some of this are collected, some of this is collected as waste from the production and then sent to recycling here, and some of it are collected separately by the consumers after their use, end of the life of the product, and separated by the consumers, and then are sorted and sent to reprocessing, and then ending up as recycled material. And this is what, and then other is collected together with the residual and mixed waste, for example, into incinerators or landfills, and this is basically lost as plastic material. So you can see, out of those 32 million tons in the beginning, we are only able today to recycle about 5 million tons. And of course, this is looking at, this is basically too little to support the need that we have, and it's also too little compared to the targets we have for Europe, and it's certainly not very circular. If we are then considering what happens in the future, if we ask the plastic industry, then they would say that we certainly expect that the demand for plastic that should increase in the future. And if we look over a number of decades, like 50 years or something, then doing nothing else, then the diagram would look like this here. Basically, it's the same pattern, that we recycle very little, but what you see just is that the lines here are becoming much thicker, meaning that we are using much more plastic, basically. So the good question is what we can and what we should do, and what would actually be sustainable to do, because recycling is good in this context, but there are some things that matters more than others. And one of the things, of course, that we have to consider, and that is very difficult to discuss, is also that we need to look at the demand, or the demand for plastic products in total, or demand for products in total. So basically the consumption of raw materials and resources. So that alone, we can probably say this is not sustainable. So we have to do something with that. And that really comes, in the case of plastic, comes down to looking at the type of products that we have, the way we distribute our products, the way we as consumers use our products, what type of products we have. So the whole use part of it is very important there. Another thing is our ability as consumers, as households, to actually put the plastic in the right bin. Today, this is not always possible to separate things, but this is something we have to do. And then we need to collect things in an efficient way. So there's a technology part that has to be much better than it is today. And even the sorting and the separation out of individual plastic types and polymers in a clean way, maintaining the quality that it had originally, and then being able to upgrade and process that and feed it back into industry. There's a lot of challenges there, both with respect to consumer behavior, to traditions, to technology, to industry. And without all those things sort of adding up and matching, then we are essentially not able to reach the goals that we have. So the bottom line is that one initiative is not enough. We have basically to do a whole range of things. So turning the question around, just giving you a brief example. This is plastic from households in Copenhagen. Well, it's sorted, it's processed, but this is what we have. And the question is, what can we do with that? Later today, we will get an example of that, but basically also, how can we turn this into new products? One of the things that we have to do is look at the design. This is just a very brief example of some of the stuff we can find in Danish plastic waste. Different types of polymers used in the same type of packaging. This is not really useful for recycling. We have to change that so it's just single polymers, so on and so forth. Also in these bottles here, we need to avoid that caps are made of one polymer, the bottle of another one, the sleeves of a third one, so on and so forth. So this is something related to the design of the products. Then the design of those products, plastic products, have to fit the sorting and waste collection system that we have in the area. And then we need to make sure that we have efficient technologies for recovering that plastic in a clean way so we can get it back. So these are three things that we need to work on in the coming years. So just to sum up, I would like to point out that we are part of a system. We cannot just say we want to, it's enough to collect the plastic waste. Of course, that's a way to avoid pollution of plastic in the environment. So this is also important, but that alone is not enough. We have to start already with the products and the design of those. Then we need to realize that that quality is important, and we need to focus on maintaining material quality throughout this the circular and this cycle, and make sure we recycle plastic at the highest possible level, even though it's easier to do some things just simply into other things. Then we need to remember also that recycling is actually only a benefit for the environment if we also save primary resources. And that's a very long story in itself, but it's not enough to make cheap products that consumers then use more of. And that is just one example where we don't save virgin materials and oil in the first place. So we have to think about that. Then we also need to realize that this costs something. It's not cheap necessarily to improve the situation and ensure circularity. So it has to be efficient. We have to make the right choices. So it has to be done on an informed basis also. And in my mind, it has to be if done efficiently and sustainably. So we have to not just base this on our gut feelings and good intentions. We also have to do a little bit of analysis before we make our choices. And what I have showed you today here, this is just one example of a way to address things from a sustainability perspective. So that was what I had, and yeah, thanks a lot for the attention, and yeah, thank you.